What happens when the school's most feared bully picks the wrong target? Jaxon Reed thought Maya Walker was just another easy victim until she flipped the game on him without ever throwing a punch. Stay tuned because this isn't just revenge, it's a downfall. Don't forget to like this video and subscribe to the channel so you never miss what happens next. Maya Walker wasn't looking for trouble. She had moved too many times, learned to keep her head down, and knew exactly how to avoid the kind of people who made high school unbearable. But trouble had a way of finding her, and this time, it came in the form of Jaxon Reed. Brookhaven High was just another school in another town, the kind that prided itself on its Friday night football games, overhyped pep rallies, and a social hierarchy carved in stone. The rich kids ruled, the outsiders stayed invisible, and the golden boy, Jaxon Reed, reigned at the top. He had everything: money, looks, power. But more than anything, he had control, the kind that made people either want to be him or fear him. No one crossed him until Maya. She wasn't special, just another transfer student, arriving with a backpack slung over her shoulder, wearing a hoodie 2 sizes too big, eyes scanning the halls like she was memorizing every exit, every blind spot, every power play before even stepping into her first class. That should have been the first warning sign. It started small like it always did, a bump in the hallway. Maya barely had time to register the hit before she stumbled forward, her shoulders slamming against a row of lockers. Not an accident, not even subtle. She turned her head just in time to see Jaxon Reed smirking over his shoulder, his group of Letterman, jacket-wearing, ego-inflated followers laughing behind him. She didn't react, just pulled her hoodie tighter over her head and kept walking. That should have been the second warning sign, but Jaxon wasn't the kind of guy who liked being ignored. The next day, her locker was trashed. Books on the floor, personal notes ripped up. Someone had even gone through the effort of stuffing an open yogurt cup inside, its sticky remnants dripping onto her sneakers. Maya sighed, cleaned it up, and never said a word. That was the final warning sign, because bullies like Jaxon thrived on reactions. They fed off humiliation, off the power of knowing they could make someone squirm. But Maya wasn't squirming, and that made her dangerous. By the end of the week, she was the school's favorite new source of entertainment. Jaxon's crew upped their game, accidentally spilling drinks on her in the cafeteria, tripping her in the hallway, whispering about her when she walked by. The teachers saw it but did nothing. The students laughed but looked away when she passed. Maya didn't flinch, didn't fight back, didn't run. She was watching every insult, every shove, every time Jaxon's friends hesitated before following his lead. She saw the cracks in his kingdom. She just needed to wait for the right moment to tear it down, because Jaxon Reed thought she was weak. But what he didn't know, he had just picked the wrong target. This is where the real game begins. Stick around to see how the Golden Boy's empire crumbles, and why you should never underestimate the quiet ones. Maya Walker had dealt with people like Jaxon Reed before. She could recognize the type within seconds. The kind of guy who walked through the halls like he owned them. The kind who expected people to laugh at his jokes, agree with his opinions, and step aside when he passed. The untouchable kind. But what made Jaxon worse wasn't just that he was the star quarterback, the golden boy of Brookhaven High, or that his daddy owned half the car dealerships in town. It was the fact that he enjoyed it. He fed off fear, the way people flinched when he was near, the way his friends, no, his lackeys, laughed just a little too hard at his jokes, the way teachers gave him a pass on things they'd punish anyone else for. And the second Maya walked into his world and didn't react like everyone else, he made it his mission to break her. It started with the usual games, a harmless bump in the hallway that sent her staggering into a row of lockers. She barely had time to regain her footing before Jaxon walked past her with that stupid smirk, his friends chuckling beside him like he had just performed some grand act of comedy. She ignored it, so he escalated. The next morning when she sat down in the cafeteria, her lunch tray was flipped onto her lap before she even took a bite. A steaming pile of mashed potatoes and gravy soaked through her hoodie, dripping onto her jeans. Laughter erupted around her. Maya calmly wiped her hands, stood up, and walked away without a word. That made them laugh harder, because to them, silence meant weakness. By the end of the week, it was a full-scale performance. Jaxon and his crew turned tormenting Maya into a daily event. Every hallway she walked down, someone was waiting with a shoulder check. Every lunch period, a new humiliation. Her locker, vandalized with Sharpie. Slut, freak, trash. The words were still scrawled across the metal when she arrived Monday morning. A few students had gathered, whispering, eyes darting between her and Jaxon, who was leaning casually against the opposite row of lockers, arms crossed, watching. Maya stared at the writing for a moment. Then, without breaking eye contact with Jaxon, she pulled a Clorox wipe from her bag and started scrubbing. No reaction, no emotion, like it didn't matter. And that pissed him off. The next move came at the Friday night football game. Brookhaven's stadium was packed, the whole town buzzing. It wasn't just a game, it was an event. Maya didn't want to be there. She had planned to spend the evening at home, headphones on, drowning out the world, but her foster parents insisted. Get out, make some friends, be a normal teenager. So she went and walked straight into Jaxon's biggest humiliation yet. It happened at halftime. Maya had gone to grab a drink, her hands stuffed into the pocket of her hoodie, when a foot hooked around her ankle. She went down hard. The ice-cold soda in her hand splattered across her front, the cup tumbling across the pavement as she skidded onto her hands and knees. Pain flared through her palms. Laughter exploded around her. She already knew who it was before she looked up. Jaxon stood above her, grinning, hands on his hips, his whole damn posse standing behind him, watching like an audience waiting for the punchline. And then he said it, loud enough for everyone to hear. Damn, Walker, you're not just a loser. You're a clumsy one, too. More laughter. Someone whistled. Someone took a picture. Maya stayed on the ground for 3 full seconds, just enough time for Jaxon to feel like he had won. Then she got up. She dusted off her jeans, wiped her bleeding palms on the back of her hoodie, and looked Jaxon dead in the eye, and smiled. Not an embarrassed smile, not an uncomfortable smile, a calm, knowing smile. Like she was waiting for this, like she was expecting this, like she had already won. And just like that, Jaxon's smile wavered. It was small, almost imperceptible, but she saw it. She saw the flicker of uncertainty. Because in that moment, for the first time in his life, he didn't feel like the one in control. And deep down, he knew it. That night as she lay in bed, her bruised knees aching, she pulled out her phone, scrolled, found what she was looking for. Screenshots, texts, voice memos, everything. Everything Jaxon had ever said, texted, bragged about, ridiculed, degraded, and mocked. She had every receipt, and tomorrow she was going to burn his entire empire to the ground. No fists, no screaming, no begging, just the truth. Because people like Jaxon, they don't need an enemy to take them down. They just need a mirror. And Maya Walker, she was going to be that mirror. And that's where the real game begins. Stay tuned, because Jaxon Reed is about to learn that. When you push the wrong person, the fall hurts a lot more. The strategy begins. Maya Walker wasn't just taking hits, she was taking notes. Jaxon Reed thought this was just another game, another weak target, another student who'd break under the weight of his cruelty. But Maya wasn't breaking. She wasn't running. She wasn't fighting back. She was waiting. And while Jackson spent his days pushing harder, trying to force a reaction, Maya spent hers studying him. Because the thing about guys like Jackson, they always make mistakes. And when they do, they never see the fall coming. The setup Brookhaven High wasn't just a school, it was a social battlefield, and Jaxon Reed had spent years building himself a throne. People feared him, people followed him, people needed him. Or at least, that's what he thought. But Maya saw it differently. She saw the cracks, the way his own friends hesitated when he barked orders, the way the teachers who once overlooked his behavior were starting to watch more closely, the way students, even the ones who laughed along with him, would go silent when he wasn't around. Jackson ruled on fear, not respect, and that meant his power was fragile. So Maya did what no one else had ever done. She let him keep digging his own grave. The turning point. The perfect opportunity came on a Wednesday afternoon, just before the last bell rang. Maya had been sitting in the back of her AP history class, minding her own business, when she caught Jackson's reflection in the window. He was watching her. That same smug expression, that same cocky arrogance. She knew what was coming before it even happened, because the next thing she heard was the sound of her chair screeching backward as a foot hooked around the leg. She barely had time to react before she hit the floor. Hard. The classroom erupted in laughter. Maya's palms stung, her books scattered across the tile, and Jackson stood over her grinning. Oops! More laughter. The teacher did nothing, just sighed and told them to settle down. Maya took a slow breath, brushing her hair from her face. This was it. This was the moment she needed. She let Jackson have his victory, let him think he had won. And then the game changed. The fall begins. That night, Maya sat in her room, fingers tapping against her phone. She had everything she needed. The texts, the DMs, the voice memos. Months worth of Jackson's worst moments. Trash-talking his teammates. Mocking teachers. Spreading disgusting rumors about the girls he pretended to respect. But she didn't just want revenge. She wanted to make sure he never had power again. So she did something Jackson would never expect. She gave his friends a choice. The break by morning, the whispers had started. Jackson knew something was off the moment he walked into school. His friends, the guys who always had his back, weren't looking at him the same way. Some ignored him completely. Others looked at him like he was a time bomb. He heard his name in conversations he wasn't a part of. The worst part? He had no idea why. Then at lunch, it all fell apart. His best friend, Ryan Porter, slammed a tray onto the table across from him. So, Jax, you want to tell me why you've been calling me a dumbass behind my back? Silence. Jackson froze. Ryan's voice wasn't joking. It wasn't playful. It was dead serious. The cafeteria went silent. Everyone was watching. Jackson let out a short, nervous laugh. Dude, what are you talking about? Ryan pulled out his phone. I'm talking about this. And just like that, Jackson saw the screenshots. Not just one or two, dozens. His own words, his own messages, everything he had ever said about the people who trusted him. And the worst part? Ryan wasn't the only one who got them, because one by one, other students checked their phones, and the whispers turned to outrage. What the hell, dude? You said that about me? Wow, man, I thought we were cool. Jackson's stomach dropped. He reached for his phone, but it was too late, because by now, the entire school had seen it. The final move, Maya sat at her usual table, calmly eating her lunch. She didn't have to watch it unfold. She could feel it. Jackson was done. His kingdom crumbled. His friends gone. His reputation destroyed. And the best part? She never had to say a word, because Jaxon Reed had done all the work himself. All she did was hold up the mirror. And now, he had to live with the reflection. The aftermath. That afternoon, as Maya walked toward the parking lot, she wasn't alone. For the first time since transferring to Brookhaven High, students actually smiled at her, nodded in respect. Because she had done something no one else had ever dared to do. She ended Jaxon Reed's reign without ever lifting a finger. And as she stepped outside, feeling the sun on her face, she finally let herself smile. Because some fights, you don't win by throwing punches, you win by being smarter. And Jaxon, he had picked the wrong target, and that's how you take down a king. Stay tuned, because power built on fear never lasts, and the ones you underestimate, they're the ones who will bury you. The wrong target, the public humiliation. Jaxon Reed's empire wasn't just falling apart, it was going up in flames. And the best part? He had no one to blame but himself. Because bullies like Jaxon, they don't lose because someone beats them. They lose because, deep down, they were always weak. Maya Walker knew that from the start. She had seen it in his eyes the first time he tried to intimidate her. He needed control. He needed an audience. And now, he had lost both. The breaking point. By Friday, Brookhaven High was buzzing. Jackson's texts had been exposed. Every cruel comment, every lie, every insult about the people who once trusted him. No one was looking at him the same way. His teammates, cold. His friends, gone. His fans, silent. And worst of all, people were laughing at him, the same way he used to laugh at everyone else. Jaxon had spent years making other people the joke. Now, he was the punchline, the cafeteria showdown. Maya didn't expect Jaxon to give up easily. Guys like him never do. So when he stormed into the cafeteria that afternoon, his jaw clenched, his fist tight, his eyes locked on her, she knew. This was it, the desperation move. Jaxon walked straight to her table, loud, confrontational, making sure everyone was watching. "You think this is funny?" His voice was sharp, shaking with barely contained rage. Maya looked up from her tray, calm as ever. "A little." Gasps, laughter. Jackson's nostrils flared. "You think you're better than me?" Maya tilted her head, studying him. He looked exhausted. Dark circles under his eyes, his usual arrogance replaced with raw frustration. He wasn't in control anymore, and he knew it. "I don't think I'm better than you, Jaxon," she said finally. "I just don't need people to be afraid of me to feel important." The cafeteria went dead silent. Jackson's face twitched. His hands clenched into fists at his sides. He wanted to hit her. Bad. But he couldn't. Because he knew, deep down, that would be the final nail in his coffin. The final blow. Maya leaned forward, lowering her voice just enough that only he could hear. "This is how it ends, Jaxon. Not with a fight, not with a big explosion. Just this." She gestured around the room at everyone watching. "You're alone now, and you did it to yourself." For a second, just a second, Jaxon looked scared, not angry, not humiliated, scared, because he realized it was over. Not because Maya had fought back, but because she never had to. She just let him destroy himself. And now, Jaxon Reed was nothing. And that's how you take down a bully. Power built on fear never lasts, and the ones you underestimate, they're the ones who will bury you. Jaxon Reed was finished. But the thing about falling from power, it's never just one moment. It's a slow, agonizing descent, where the people who once feared you start seeing you for what you really are. And Jaxon, he was just starting to realize how deep the fall really was. The fallout begins Monday morning. Jaxon stepped onto Brookhaven High's campus, expecting whispers. What he didn't expect? Silence. Not the kind that meant people were scared of him. The kind that meant he was already forgotten. His usual table at the cafeteria, taken. His teammates, ignoring him. The cheerleaders, acting like he didn't exist. Jaxon Reed had gone from king to nobody in less than a week. And Maya Walker? She was still standing, untouched, unbothered, watching. The last attempt at control Jaxon wasn't the kind of guy to accept defeat. People like him, they don't know how. So that afternoon, as Maya grabbed her books from her locker, she felt his presence behind her. She didn't flinch, didn't tense up. Just calmly shut her locker and turned around. Jaxon stood there, hands in his pockets, but there was no smirk this time. "What do you want, Jaxon?" His jaw clenched. His usual confidence was gone, replaced with something else, something desperate. "I just want to know," he said, voice low. "Why?" Maya raised an eyebrow. "Why what? Why didn't you just fight back? Why didn't you hit me, call me out, humiliate me the way I did to you?" Maya studied him for a long moment. She could see it now. The cracks, the doubt, the fear. He wasn't asking because he wanted revenge. He was asking because he didn't understand how he lost. "Because I didn't need to," she said simply. Jackson's lips pressed into a thin line. "That's bullshit," Maya shrugged. "Is it?" She gestured to the hallway, to the students passing by without sparing him a second glance. "Look around, Jaxon. No one's afraid of you anymore." Jackson's hands curled into fists. He hated that she was right. "You think you won?" he muttered. Maya tilted her head. "Didn't I?" Jaxon had no answer. Because what could he say? That he still had power? That people still respected him? They didn't. He had spent years building himself into a legend, and Maya had turned him into a cautionary tale. And that was something he could never come back from. The final goodbye. The next morning, Jaxon Reed was gone. Rumors spread quickly. Some said his parents pulled him out of Brookhaven High. Others said he transferred out of embarrassment. But the truth, it didn't matter, because the damage was done. Brookhaven High moved on without him. And Maya? She walked through the halls, head high, unbothered, because she knew what Jaxon never did. Power built on fear never lasts. And sometimes, the best revenge isn't fighting back. It's letting the truth destroy them. And that's how you end a bully. Because the quiet ones, they're the ones you should fear the most. The wrong target, the lesson that echoes. Jaxon Reed was gone, but his story was far from over. Because what happens after the king falls? Does the school forget? Do things return to normal? Or does the impact linger, shaping everything that comes next? Maya Walker knew the answer. Because once you expose a system built on fear and silence, people don't just walk away. They start asking questions. And once people start questioning the way things have always been, nothing is ever the same again. The school that woke up. The Monday after Jackson's disappearance felt different, not just because he was gone, but because something had shifted. People who used to stay quiet weren't afraid to speak up anymore. Teachers who had always looked the other way were watching more closely. And the ones who had laughed along with Jaxon, they were nervous, because if Jaxon, the untouchable, golden boy quarterback, could fall, then what did that mean for the rest of them? Maya's new reality. Maya didn't expect to become a symbol. She had never wanted attention. But people noticed. The girl who never fought back, never lashed out, never gave Jaxon what he wanted. She had won anyway. And now, people wanted to know how. Some students approached her in the hallways, asking her if she planned it all along. Others just nodded when they passed, a silent acknowledgement. Respect. She didn't need to say anything, because the truth was already written all over the school. Jackson's absence was louder than his presence had ever been. The ones who learned the hard way, but not everyone moved on. Ryan Porter, the same guy who had once been Jackson's right-hand man, sat alone at lunch now. His old friends had distanced themselves, afraid he'd go down with Jaxon. And even though he hadn't done half the things Jaxon had, he still let them happen. And now, he was paying for it. Maya wasn't cruel. She didn't rub it in. But she also didn't forget, because Ryan, like everyone else who stood by and watched, had made his choice. And choices, they come with consequences. The shift in power. The most interesting part, the way power had changed. For years, Jaxon had been the center of everything. If you wanted to survive at Brookhaven High, you played his game. But now, the rules had changed. No more laughing along to avoid being next. No more standing by while someone got humiliated. No more silent approval. The school had seen what happened when a bully lost his power, and no one wanted to be next. The one who stayed the same, Maya, didn't let it get to her head. She still sat in the same seat at lunch, still walked the same halls, still kept to herself. She had never wanted power. She just wanted to be left alone. And now, for the first time in a long time, she was. The final thought. The truth about people like Jaxon Reed? They're not invincible. They just make everyone believe they are. But once someone stands up, even without throwing a single punch, it becomes impossible to pretend anymore. Maya hadn't just taken down a bully. She had ended an era. And Brookhaven High, it would never be the same again. And that's how you change the game. Because power isn't about being feared. It's about knowing you don't need fear at all. The wrong target, the story that needed to be told. What if the school bully picked the wrong target? What if the quiet girl, the one no one noticed, the one who didn't fight back, wasn't weak at all? What if, instead of breaking, she let him destroy himself? This isn't just another high school story. This is the fall of Jaxon Reed. And it's the story that no one at Brookhaven High will ever forget. The legend of the bully. For years, Jaxon ruled the school. He had the looks, the money, the reputation, and more importantly, he had control. People laughed at his jokes, even when they weren't funny. People stood by in silence, even when they knew he was wrong. People feared him. And that fear? That's what kept him on top. Until one day it didn't, because Maya Walker wasn't afraid. And for the first time in his life, Jaxon met someone he couldn't break. The fall that no one saw coming. At first, it was just another game to him. The shoulder checks, the spilled drinks, the locker vandalism. He thought he was winning. But what he didn't realize, Maya wasn't playing. She wasn't reacting. She wasn't fighting back. She was watching, waiting, letting him make every mistake. And then, when the moment was right, he lost everything. Not because Maya exposed him, but because she let the truth do the work for her. The texts, the DMS, the voice messages, everything Jaxon had ever said, done, gotten away with. It all came crashing down in front of the very people who had once worshipped him. And when it was over, he wasn't the king anymore. He was the joke. The aftermath that changed everything. Brookhaven High moved on. No one talked about Jaxon anymore. No one missed him. The school felt different. The fear, gone. The silence, broken. The rules, changed. And Maya? She never bragged, never claimed victory. She just walked the halls like she always had. Quiet, calm, and untouchable. Because the real power, it doesn't come from making people afraid of you. It comes from knowing you never needed fear to begin with. And that's why you never underestimate the quiet ones. Because the real game changers, they don't have to fight. They just have to watch you fall.